Prime Minister Netanyahu has said he plans on going forward with it regardless of U.S. support. We heard then President Biden sort of pushed back on that, and they talked this week for the first time in over a month. And during that call, when they shared these differing opinions, Prime Minister Netanyahu agreed to send a delegation of Israeli leaders to Washington, D.C., which will happen next week, where they will hear about what the U.S. believes are alternatives to full-scale operations in Rafah.
Welcome to Reporter's Notebook, where we talk to the Washington Examiner's top journalists about the stories breaking on their beats. I'm Jim Antle. I'm joined today by defense reporter Mike Brest. Mike, we heard some more congressional testimony about the withdrawal from Afghanistan, some top generals who are involved in that process. What, if anything, new did we learn?
So we didn't quite learn a lot of new things, but we heard more unvarnished opinions that we hadn't quite heard yet.
Sure.
And so in particular, it was General McKenzie, who was the former head of U.S. Central Command, which is the area of responsibility over Afghanistan and the Middle East. He was in charge of the, he was the head of CENTCOM during the withdrawal. And we also heard from retired General Mark Milley, who was the Joint Chief of Staff during that time as well. And so throughout their testimony, one of the big things that stood out was that they both defended the military's non-combatant evacuation operation that we watched play out over the final 2 weeks of August 2021, where we saw those planes fly out with at-risk Afghans because of the Taliban had come in and sort of overtaken the government. And so to be more specific, what they said was they believed that the chaos that we saw ensue was a result of the State Department not declaring the need for that evacuation operation sooner. And so by law, it's the State Department that's required to sort of ask for it, and then the military is the one that carries it out. And so the military, they said, had already been planning to do this, but were not given the green light to actually go ahead and start it until the middle of August, the day before the Taliban took over Kabul, the capital of Afghanistan. And so at that point, they only had about 2 weeks before they were leaving entirely, and they now had more than 100,000 people that wanted to get out, all within that time period.
Give us an update as to where things stand in Gaza. There's been some tension, renewed tension between the Biden administration and the Netanyahu government over how to move forward.
Everything right now, all eyes are on the southern Gaza city of Rafah. And so this is the city that is along the Gaza-Egyptian border. And right now there are more than 1 million Palestinians currently sheltering in this city. And so at the start of Israel's military operations back in October, they started in the northern part of Gaza, and they encouraged those residents to move south to avoid the battlefield. Then as Israel's operations went south, as they started clearing the entire strip, they encouraged those people there to continue moving south. And so what we've seen is a steady stream of Palestinians moving south, and they've all finally sort of settled into Rafah. Now that's a problem because Israel, and we've seen this from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu a lot, they maintain that they have to go into Rafah to sort of continue and then complete this clearing operation which they're doing from north to south. Now, we've heard the U.S. and a number of Western countries say that they can't do this. They shouldn't do it, that it's irresponsible to go about this type of military operation with such a dense population of civilians.
Because of the civilian casualties.
Exactly. And we also know that one of Hamas's primary tactics is to embed itself within and underneath civilian populations because they benefit from a high civilian casualty count. So that's part of their strategy. And so President Biden has said that he would consider this somewhat of a red line for him. Full-scale Israeli operations in Rafah without a fully fleshed out plan as to what to do with the civilians and how to care for them. And so Prime Minister Netanyahu has said he plans on going forward with it regardless of U.S. support. We heard then President Biden sort of pushed back on that, and they talked this week for the first time in over a month. And during that call, when they shared these differing opinions, Prime Minister Netanyahu agreed to send a delegation of Israeli leaders to Washington, D.C., which will happen next week, where they will hear about what the U.S. believes are alternatives to full-scale operations in Rafah.
So the Defense Department and our national security officials have concerns or expressed concern about a possible alliance emerging militarily between 3 countries. What are those countries and what are the concerns?
Iran, China, and Russia. And so we've heard for a while now that these, the U.S. or the Defense Department has said for years now that China is its pacing challenge.
Right.
It considers Russia an acute threat, and we've now seen since October 7th just the full range of Iran's proxies at work throughout the Middle East, and now they're all working somewhat in coordination to benefit one another and to all move towards goals, against U.S. interests globally. And so we heard earlier this week leaders from U.S. Central Command, current leaders, talk about how this is a growing problem and how each one benefits from one another and each one can help where one is lacking. And so we've seen Iran provide Russia with drones for more than a year now that they're using in Ukraine. We've heard as recently as this week that the G7 is concerned about the possibility that Iran will provide Russia with ballistic missiles for the use in Ukraine. We also know that China buys a lot of or most of Iran's oil that is sanctioned by the U.S. And so this really is a grouping of 3 countries all acting with goals, opposite the U.S.,
Right.
strengthening their positions now.
Thank you, Mike. You can read Mike and the rest of our national security team's coverage at washingtonexaminer.com.